Hey, kia ora, Helen Browns here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1143. Woo! Getting up there in numbers. So how has your day been? Yeah, we're going to be talking about what moonshine, probate, and patents all have in common. And, just give you some interesting things that we'll learn today. But first of all, I got woken up at around 4:30 this morning. I had a numb thumb. I could not figure out why. My thumb, this is the one that has the tendinitis in it. It was numb for like 3 hours, and I was doing stretches and other exercises that I've been given to help strengthen the wrist and all of that. And it took 3 hours before the numbness went away. It was really weird trying to take notes with a numb thumb when you're trying to hold a pen. That was very interesting. So we have the brace on with the extra support on it for the thumb on today to give it a little bit of support. So we'll see how that goes. Just got back from walking. It's the first time I've worn it out with Zephy, and that was interesting. But anyway, so today was day 2 of the classes, not counting Wednesday, which was all back to basic stuff. So today was day 2 of the actual summit. It was awesome. Oh my gosh, the first one, I missed the first half of it because I was doing the wake-up call that I normally do on Friday mornings. But the first class today was... It was entitled Moonshine and Stills, Finding Archived Records for Your Moonshiner Ancestors. So do you have any moonshiners in your ancestry? And I've put a question into the description, and that question, sorry, I'm a little slow today because we're left-handing the mouse right now, which thankfully we know how to do that. So do you have any ancestors that were involved in moonshine? And what do Moonshine and NASCAR have in common? So, did you know? This one I learned back in New Zealand years ago. Don't ask me how I came across this little bit of information, but I did. But I discovered years ago that moonshine was how NASCAR. Oops, sorry, my phone just fell off the phone stand. It's not a good thing when that happens. Something I'll figure it out later. So moonshiners were the ones that started were the precursor to NASCAR racing. So what happened is that during Prohibition they had those illegal moonshine stills, and this was all down in the southern states. I can't remember the list of. There's a list of states that, but I know they're all in the southern area, and they would take a standard car, so a stock car. Listen to the connections. They would just take a standard car. They would strip out the floorboards. They would strip out the extra seating except for the driver's seat. They would soup up the engine. So you had this standard stock car, just regular one on the car sales yard that had been stripped down so they could carry more moonshine. And the idea was and of course it had to be souped up so they could avoid the federal agents when they were doing their runs. And their runs would always be done at night when the moon was out. Right? Yeah, you're starting to get all the connections. And so they would do these runs. But then, of course, amongst all the runners, they would start bragging about who was going faster, who could get from point A to point B faster. So they thought, well, let's race it out. So they'd start at the same still, they'd have the same destination in mind, and they would take different routes because, the runners always know the really good fast routes and the shortcuts and everything, and off they would go. And the one that would lose would complain about how he got pulled over by the federal agent. He had to outrun the federal agents. There was slow traffic. He got caught in a rut, and all sorts of excuses and everything else. So then it eventually moved into a farmer's field, and they just started racing each other around in circles around the farmer's field, and people would start coming in and watching. And so the farmer was sort of like, his field's getting torn up here, and he's sort of like, yeah, we ain't going to do this no more. And so he started charging people to come onto his field And then he built grandstands, and that was how NASCAR got its start. So Moonshine has a role in the start of NASCAR, and they're called stock cars because the cars were just straight off the lot. They were just stock standard cars straight off the lot that they they souped up the engines inside them. They pulled out the floorboards and the settings so they could put more moonshine in there, and that's how NASCAR came to be. I don't know if they told that story or not this morning because I came in during the second half, but the half that I listened to was sort of like, because there's certain words you have to know if you're going to go to the archives to look up for moonshiners. And, you can look through the newspapers because you will see people who got arrested for running in the for running moonshine and that sort of thing. And there would be arrest records there. And then there's the court records, and then there's the sheriff office records as well. So you don't just look through the court records, you also have to look through the sheriff records as well, because they're different records to what the courts have. And then they were talking about how you can go and look up people's mugshots and things, and the information that would be on the card with the mugshot all handwritten in there. So that was kind of fascinating. I thought, this is really cool. And then the next class we had was on probate, talking about probate, what information we can get out of probate records. And and then that's with probate. And with probate, you have we learned the history of the will, and they were showing he showed a really early will that was written by the Egyptian with their hieroglyphics. I was like, what? Wait, what? So yeah, wills have been around for a long time. Probate has been around for a long time. And so we talked about the different terminology in probates, how to look up probates, information you can get from probate. And I know I found a lot of really good stuff on the English, because they have the English wills and testaments. And so you can go and for some years you can go and you can actually look those up, and it would say, who it was that had passed away, the date they had died, and then they had who they were leaving their stuff to, and if it was a relative, how they were related, like to my wife I am leaving, or to my son or my daughter, things like that. So probates are full of really good information, and you can find out all sorts of stories in probates, and the probate records and things. Not only do you have the will, but there's also all the investigation that goes into it, because with probates, there's the discovery of the assets and the finances and all of that sort of stuff as well. And there might even in some wills be little surprises in there, like extra children that nobody in the family knew about. Wills contain all sorts of very interesting information if you know where to live, if you want to read them, and the probate packets and all of that. After that, we were into the patents and people who had invented stuff. And why did that do that? There we go. I'm trying to get to a different tab on my screen because I go, yes, we got into patents with your ancestor, the inventor. I had to tell you, some of those patent laws were pretty like, wait, what? You had to be, at one point you had to be like an American citizen. If you were foreign, you couldn't file for a certain amount of time and all of that. And we're showing some of the patents, and they had their on one page that we're looking at for the list of patents. There was the one that the Wright brothers filed for a flying machine. There was even, if you've seen janitorial equipment where they have the rollers on the bucket, so you put the mop in there, they have those string mops, and you put the mop in there and just up and down, and then you step on the pedal and pull it out through the rollers. We saw the original patent for the rollers that fitted on a bucket, and that was like from what year was that? I think it was like 1860 something. If brain's gone. And no, I didn't write it down. I'm just sitting there going, wow. But patent records revealed a lot of information as well, because when you file a patent, you had to put notification into different publications that you were filing this patent, so people could object to it and all of that sort of stuff, and say, no, they can't have that patent. I was the first one there with that, and I've already got it, blah, 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 whatever. So they could dispute it. And then there were a lot of women that had filed patents as well. And on the thing, they would turn around and say what their name was with their maiden name there, which is the name they were born with, their last name, but now known as, and it would have their married name there. So now you could go look up their marriage records. So you could find lots of hints and tips within a patent record that could help you find more information for your research for your on the family trees and different genealogies and that sort of thing. And it was just fascinating, the stuff that was in there and how early some patents were filed. Because you think of things when you turn around and says, oh, this particular one, and I'm sort of like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And then you sort of like look down and it says like 1861. You're like, what? So that was a very revealing class when you realize how long some of these devices had been around. Like they even showed you the patent for Henry Ford's first car, or the motorized wagon. I think what do they call it? Motorized wagon, I think it was. But it was just fascinating, all the stuff that was in there that she was going on saying, look, here's this patent here. And if you get the packet, this is what you will find in the packet. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of great information. And there's even a museum that you can go to. I got to go look it up. But there's a museum that you can go to, because for a while when they were filing patents, they had to send in a miniature working model to show what it was they were building. And so they could actually physically see it, not just see all the plans, but they also had to see a miniature model. And there's actually a museum where you can go and see. They've got over 5,000 of these miniature models from different patents that have been filed over the years, but they never have all 5,000 on display at any one time. But you can go along and you can see these little miniatures of all of these from patents. And in America, they said there was a lot of inventions that came out of America because of the agriculture that they were having. Somebody needed something to do something, so they went and made it. Basically out of necessity and out of need, out of necessities, that they needed something to do something, and it wasn't. And then we looked at the patent for the guy who invented barbed wire, and I'm like sitting there thinking, hang on, barbed wire? No, that wasn't New Zealand. It was the number 8 wire that was New Zealand. That was invented in New Zealand. And they needed a wire of a certain thing, so they made it. And it's called number 8 wire. But even some patents were filed from overseas. And there was one that was filed by a German person. What was it for? Can't remember what it was for, but it was filed here in the US. And a lot of international people would, if their product was going to be used in the US, they would file the patent in the US, as well as they would file a patent in every country that they were going to be selling their product in, so that it was protected. And protected for however long the patent was good for, and that sort of stuff, until somebody made some improvements to it and refiled for the patent for updates or improvements. So it was very fascinating learning about the patent process and how that all worked. And they said, it could take them years back in the 1800s, because everything was, she goes, everything was snail mail. And all I could think of, no, it was the Pony Express. Because they would have to then, the inventor would then have to get a lawyer who would then file the patent for them. And then the patent office would say, well, we need this information and we need that information. So it would go back to the lawyer. The lawyer would then go back to the inventor. The inventor would make the changes, send it back to the lawyer, who would then send it back to the patent office. And they said that rigmarole, that process could take years. And some of them, and in the patent packet is on the outside is listed all of the years. And we could see one of them took like 5 years. And it wasn't a complicated device. I think it was that the one with the railroad tie? It was a device that it was sort of like a lever, looked like an overgrown crowbar with just one forked piece on one end. And what it did is that you put it in the ground and you used it to lift up something to do with the railroad. It was either the rail or the tie, or the rail or the ties, which are the wooden pieces that go across that the rail sits on. But it was something that would help lift one of those things. And it took them 5 years to get the patent for it. And other ways to find out if somebody had a patent is that look at their obituaries, because if they had invented something, and then you could go, and going back to yesterday's lecture on boring relatives, I thought, well, this is a way you can find out if your boring relative actually invented something, is look at their obituary. Does it say in their obituary that they invented something? And then you can go and look up the patent. And then there was advertisements. They said, as you're going through the newspapers, And we had the archivist we had yesterday who was talking to us about county records, I think it was. Hang on. She's a really good. Oh no, this was a different one. Sorry. The one that talked about the moonshine was the one that was the archivist we had yesterday about breathing life into boring ancestors. But you could then go look at, but they said that you read the entire newspaper. If you're looking at old newspapers, read everything, because there could be a notification in there that somebody has filed a patent, and or there could be an advertisement in there that for some business, and down there it's got that they hold the patent for something, whatever they hold the patent for, and that then you can then go to the patent office and you can have a look. And they even had there, like, if somebody had invented something and passed away, who the rights for that patent had been passed on to, or if they worked for a company and they were an employee who worked for a company, they would then transfer the rights of the patent to, they have all those legally terms, transfer the rights from the employee to the company, so the company would be the one that would benefit from the patent. But it was just fascinating finding out all this really cool information about that. And then we got on to, after lunch, we got on to treasures and township records. So this was kind of fascinating, because we kind of learned about how towns started, how they worked out their borders, how they had the standard of measure, and how they worked. They had this quadrant system, and how to figure out where a property was based on this quadrant system. And I thought, this kind of sounds familiar. And we had covered this when we were talking about land deeds and land records and things back on my class that I did in July. And so I thought, well, this will be good. This will be a good refresher for me. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just looking and I'm watching everything going through, because I wasn't taking many notes, because these presenters this week have given us great notes. We have a syllabus every day, and there's notes for every single class in there. And then we get to, in about a week or two after this is finished, we'll get an email that will give us all the links for all the classes, and we have until the end of the year to go back and rewatch them. And I'm sitting there, and she's talking about Bloom and Fairfield County, Ohio. And there's this name, Jacob Smith, there. And I'm like, that name kind of sounds, why does that name sound familiar? And I'm like thinking, and I kind of ignore it, and then I go back to it, and I'm like, oh, hang on. Don't I have a Jacob Smith and Brad side of the tree? And before I could take notes on the information that was on the PowerPoint, I went, she changed screens. I'm sort of like, oh, go back. And so I went and pulled up the records. And so I pulled up the records, and Brad's second great grandfather on his mother's paternal side, I think it is. Anyway, so one of Brad's second great grandfathers was Jacob Smith, who was born in Fairfield, Ohio, in Fairfield County, Ohio. We just don't know what town. We haven't found his birth records yet to find out which town he was born in. But now I have other places to go look, because I paid attention to what was being said and everything over the last couple of days. And so at the end, during question time, I asked if we could go back and have a look at that slide, and she ended up getting booted out, and all technical issues started taking place. So she said, email me. So I emailed her. She said, and like within 5 minutes after the class finished, I had a copy of that slide and looked and went, damn, it's not the same one. The years were a little off. Like, his second great grandfather had been born in 1840. And this one had settled come to Bloom in like 1812, and he was a soldier. And I was like, oh, well, maybe it could be a relative of some sort. So now I have another research question to find out where in Fairfield, Ohio, Brad's second great grandfather was born, who his parents were, and did his brother have any siblings that may have moved into the county during that time, because we know that the guy that we think is Brad's third great grandfather actually started off in Virginia and moved over to Ohio, and then his second great grandfather, who was born in Fairfield, Ohio, moved to Bluffton Wells County, Indiana, because that's where he passed away. So we've got all these little crumbs, and now I've got to see if I can put them all together. So I now have another research project. And let's see, what was the last? Oh, I didn't attend a lot. We took a break, and I got so sidetracked researching Jacob Smith because also like I had this bee in my bonnet. I have to go find out more information. So I started researching it and completely missed the next class, the last class of the day. So I figured I'll just go watch the recording. So it was a really, really good day today. Lots of great information, lots of more resources now on where to go and look for things. And but yeah, we're having some really good topics put in there. And then today I got access to the agenda for next week because I have another the Association of Professional Genealogists. We have our annual conference next week, and they've got these different training classes and everything else. So I've been in there, and some of them are like everybody goes to this one, and then at this time you got either this one or this one to go to. So I've been going through and working through that, but I'm going to miss the first 2 days because I'll be at Networking Riches, but Friday, Saturday I'll be at the conference, and most of what I want to see anyway is at the is on Friday and Saturday. So I think there's only one. It's only one subject that is on the first 2 days. I'm like, darn. But it's not going to matter because we'll get the recordings. I love how they give us recordings. It's awesome because we can go back, and some of them only give you to like the end of the month. Like you finish this class in July, you've got 3 weeks to watch the recordings. But this one that I'm doing this week, we've got till the end. We get the links in a week or two, and then we got till the end of the year to go back and watch the recordings. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, it's been a really good day today, even with a numb thumb. But that was only for, let's see, I woke up at 4:30 with a numb thumb. Like I could have feeling in it, and I was like going like this on it, and I could feel I was pretty, sort of like, what numbness feels like in nothing. But it was just the weirdest feeling. Like I couldn't pick up my water cup here. I couldn't pick up my water mug here because it just felt weird. I was holding a pen and trying to take notes, and it just felt really weird. But after about 4 hours, it cleared up. So, but I did all my stretches and movement exercises to do to help with my wrist when it starts playing up. There's certain exercises and stuff I have to do, and that may have helped. Don't know, but it may have helped. But yeah, so it was kind of fun. It was kind of fun. And then my new shoes arrived today. My sneakers were at the point, my walking sneakers, they are over 3 years old because I got them in July of 2019 when I was back in New Zealand for my brother's 50th birthday. So they have done pretty well, but it's where the tread is now gone. The next layer of rubber is now gone, is almost gone. You know how some soles have like the white piece and they have that thin layer of black? Well, if you look at the soles, all the tread's gone. We're onto the black, smooth black bit, and in some places the white's starting to show through. And I was like, damn, we're gonna have to go get new shoes. The problem is I don't know what size those shoes were. But Amazon has this really cool thing where you can try shoes on, and if they don't fit, you can send them back. It's try before you buy. They send them to you. You have a certain amount of time to try them and send them back if you don't want them, or keep them. So it's like, okay. And I just gotten some Skechers slip-ons without the mules. And so I still had the sizing from that, and they fit beautifully. So I used that to go get me another couple of pairs of shoes. And one of them is just a little loose, but it's not loose enough to go down half a size. So it's sort of like, do I go too tight and hope it stretches, or do I just... But I did a walk in those shoes tonight, and it was fine. And then I have another pair, which is kind of similar to what I have for the slides, but they've got the heel piece on the back, and those are really comfy too. So I got 2 pairs, and they arrived today, and I was super excited to get those. So I have new shoes, and I didn't have to go to a store to get them. Oh, I know. When it comes to clothes shopping or footwear, I'm sort of like, I put it off as long as possible. But I got to figure out what to wear, formal wear for a wedding coming up at when's the wedding? Thanksgiving weekend. So I've got to figure out what to do about a formal outfit for that. That's going to be the fun one because I'm going to have to go shopping for that. Maybe I'll take a friend with me. I do that. Anyway, I'm out of here. Go have a super fantastic sparkling evening. Time for a smoothie. Have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, konera.